As I said earlier, there are some manufacturers out there that don't quite get the transformer technology. Now this box has a transformer in it, but what I find is interesting is they meet the criteria for weight, but they really don't meet the criteria for performance. And as you'll see here, going from my power line to the output of this transformer-based product, it really hasn't done anything to reduce the noise. I still have the same 1.5 volts coming in between hot and neutral, actually 1.5 to 2 volts, and on the ground, I still have the 1.5 to 4.8 volts. Well, why is that? Well, this box, even though it's called a power conditioner, is an autoformer. Well, what does that mean? Well, what it means is that it regulates the voltage. It has a tap switching technology in there that slides across a winding of a transformer to make sure that you have regulation, but not isolation. And what does that mean? Well, in an autoformer, you can't bond neutral and ground together. So all that ground reference noise that we had, the 1.5 to 4.8 volts, walks right through it. Because it's an autoformer as well, it really doesn't have much in terms of filtering to it. So again, all the noise between hot and neutral walks through. In order to get control of your power quality needs in your facility, you really need to have a low impedance isolation transformer. I mentioned earlier about the benefits of it. Number one, you have a neutral to ground bond. Number two, you can design a filter around the output of it. When it's designed properly, here is the performance that you get. You can see that my normal mode noise now is down to 200 millivolts, and my ground reference noise is down to 80 millivolts. All of POWERVAR products, our conditioners, are all designed with taking that worst case waveform defined by the IEEE of 6,000 volts. With that injected through our product, we'll get less than 10 volts out between hot and neutral, less than 0.5 volt neutral to ground. Repeatability no matter where you plug it in. One other topic I'd like to discuss is UPS products. Most people that use UPS products use them because they believe they give you total protection of the AC line. What you're going to see here is that that's not really true. The UPS world is as convoluted as the surge suppression market and the filter market. They play on the fact you can't see what they do. And so what I'm going to do here is take a look at output waveforms of UPSs and then the noise associated with their output. Most people think because you have a UPS you're going AC to DC to AC. That's true in an online unit, but most of the units that are used today are what we call line interactive and offline UPS. In fact, they pass all the noise as they receive it. I'm going to start with the waveform here. If you look at my scope, what you're seeing again is our AC sine wave. It's nice and clean and crisp. What's interesting and that most people don't recognize is that when UPSs go to battery, the waveform changes dramatically. You can see here on the scope that that sine wave is no longer a sine wave. It's really a modified sine or quasi-sine, anything of that nature. The UPS, if you didn't know any better, because it will run your computer, you would think that it's giving you a sine wave out. You can see when I plug it back in that that waveform goes away and you have a nice clean sine wave. So in essence, what it's showing you is that it's passing the power it receives. It really doesn't do anything until there's an outage. If we go back and take a look at the line noise again, you'll see some interesting things with this product. I'm going to put my noise levels back up on the scope, especially with the noise between hot and neutral. Watch what happens when the UPS goes to inverter. You can see that the spikes significantly go off the screen. In fact, if I take a look at the amplitude of the energy coming out of there, I've got about 187 volts coming out of the inverter of that UPS. Keep in mind again, acceptable levels are less than 10 volts. So you can see that when you need this UPS the most, the environment gets the worst. If we take a look at the ground side to this as well, you're going to see that our noise levels on the ground have significantly gone up as well. And if I take a look at their amplitudes, I'm getting about, I think, 10 volts here coming out of the ground reference of this system, about 20 times what are acceptable for today's electronics. So don't believe just because you buy a UPS you have protection today. That's not true at all. And it's not true for a number of reasons. Number one, if you want to do the UPS right, you need to have a sine wave technology. A sine wave technology will keep the levels below 5 volts at all times. You also need to think about the transformer again, because the transformer gives you the control that you need over the AC line. You need to take care of the common mode noise, and you need to take care of the noise between hot and neutral. Let's take a look at the output of the POWERVAR unit. You can see now, again, this is our output waveform from the unit. When I go to battery, you'll see that we still have a nice clean sine wave on the output of the unit. Very unlike we saw in the competitor's unit. Again, there's a cost associated with that. It's not cheap to do a sine wave technology. But what it gives you is the benefits to work with an isolation transformer so that you get a nice clean output. Let's take a look at the noise that's associated with this waveform when it goes to inverter. You can see now I have about 2.1 volts of noise coming out of the output of the UPS. When I go to inverter, you now see that my noise levels are about 4 volts. So well within the guidelines of less than 10. We have a nice clean output between hot and neutral. With respect to ground, when we look at the ground side, again you can see that we're around 80 millivolts on the output, even when we go to battery. So we get a nice clean output all the time through the POWERVAR unit, and the reason being is that every one of these units utilizes an isolation transformer to take control of those noise variables that can interfere with the operation of your equipment. At POWERVAR, our products are designed to protect the process. And in order to do that properly, you have to have the isolation piece. Most of the manufacturers out there, although they make good online products in terms of AC to DC to AC, they're bringing their neutral and ground straight through the unit, which will cause common mode issues to develop within your system. Again, it's about the process, protecting that process, and when you protect that process, you get uptime and reliability of your system, and that's really what the POWERVAR protection scheme's about.